Hey y'all, it's Laura and I'm back with the Cocoa Vanilla Studio layout. This time we are using the Storyteller collection to scrap 4 3x4 photos, and this time we are going to do a diagonal design. Now I was completely befuddled by how to use this paper. I really wanted to incorporate these lovely little crosses in the corners, and I wanted to do a diagonal design. That is all that I knew when I sat down. No real plan in mind. I thought maybe I'll just cluster the photos together. It'll be fine. It didn't end up working out that way, and I did still get all 4 photos on the page, but we did not do a clustering of them all together like I normally do when I have multiple photos. I normally try to create one focal image combination of all of the photos. And in this case, I did something a little bit different. It's going to be 2 areas of focal image on the page. Now, to get started, I went ahead and used the journaling cards to mat my photos. This is just a really quick and easy way to get your photos matted, particularly if you use a at-home printer that prints a little bit smaller than 3x4, then you can get away with using journaling cards as your mats, which is what I did. So I have a gray, a navy, a yellow, and a pink, and so each of the photos has a slightly different border, and it's a very thin, subtle border. I really didn't want to take away too much attention from my photos, and so I tried to keep this part very, very simple. Now, all of these photos are from a trip that we took to Minnesota, so that my oldest son could visit the University of Minnesota, which is where he's hoping to do his graduate program in 4 years. And we were just talking about, hey, let's go visit some places while we're here in Minnesota, get a feel for the Twin Cities and what kind of interesting things they have. And we found this sculpture garden, which was really cool. It was kind of hidden next to a neighborhood, and it's not huge, but it was really fun to walk through, and it was bitterly cold in April, and we really enjoyed it though. We had a great time. Now, I played around a lot with the configuration of these photos, and I left the ideas in because they would all work. You could make all of these work, but it just wasn't what I was looking for. And so I'm trying several different things. This is the point at which I realized, hey, I could split these up into 2 pairs of photos instead of trying to make them all into one cluster of photos. And this, I think, was my breakthrough moment. Now, this is not how I'm going to do it, but this was my breakthrough moment of, hey, wait a minute, I can make this work if I just simply break them into 2 sections. And again, I left these ideas in. If you would like to, you could definitely pick these up and use these to create your own layouts, and I may do that in the future as well, because they were all kind of fun ideas. It just wasn't quite what I was looking for. And then this happened. And I got very excited at this point because I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I could do kind of a column design, right? It's a modified column design. And this too could have worked, and I almost did this. What changed my mind on this one in particular was that I really wanted to go from top left to bottom right with the crosses, and it just didn't look quite what I had imagined. I wanted the crosses to kind of feel like they were in the background, but part of the photo clusters. And so this is what I end up deciding to do. I decide to layer 2 sets of photos at the top left corner, 2 at the bottom right, and I put them on a diagonal. Because remember, that was the original plan, was to go on a diagonal. And so while the column design of having them stacked vertically would have worked just fine and looked kind of cool, I really wanted to do a diagonal layout with this one. So after playing around with this chipboard title for ages, I kid you not, it was ages, I decided to shorten the title to Love This so that it would fit perfectly between my 2 sets of photos. That also allows me some room for journaling and some embellishment without having that giant story word covering up too much of my photos, which is what was happening. Now I'm going to dive into the embellishment packs. Now this first embellishment pack I've almost completely depleted. Like it's down to dregs, really. There's not much left. And so I do end up pulling in a second ephemera pack and digging into that for some more options. But I did try a few things. I did try to see what would work. just size-wise, shape-wise, what I could get away with. I do keep the embellishing fairly simple on this one, which is normal. When I have a ton of photos, I do tend to keep my embellishing simple anyway, simply because I'm trying not to compete with my photos. I want my photos to have the attention, not the embellishments. But if I use just 1 or 2 photos, I can go a little bit more embellishment heavy without taking away too much space, wide open space, for my photos to stand out, to be the focus. When you have 4 photos, it's a little bit different. There's a lot of different things happening in these photos. While they're fairly simple, there's not a very busy color scheme to these photos. There is quite a bit of difference from one to another. And so I think that it is important to keep that in mind and not overwhelm your layout, especially if you're using a lot of photos at once. Keep it simple. There's nothing wrong with simple layouts. I love simple layouts. I think they tend to look more elegant. I think they tend to look a little bit more organized and planned. It just isn't my normal style because organized and planned, we don't know her. So I tend to go for something a little bit more cluster heavy and focused in one area, and then I just leave some white space in another area to kind of balance things out. This is more reminiscent of a series that I did that was called Pocketless Pages, which is where I created collage style layouts that pretty much filled the page. This one pretty much fills the page. And I really enjoy this kind of scrapbooking. It's a lot of fun to do. It can be a little bit tricky if you don't have a lot of photos, but since I had 4, I thought this is perfect for a collage style layout. And so I'm just going to kind of fill in the gaps as much as possible. I'm flipping through the ephemera to see if there's any bits and pieces that I could absolutely use. I've came across this little banner and I do end up popping that onto the left photo there. Go over, Laura. Left photo. And that's where it's going to land, and underneath the picture of me. And I thought that was a really fun little detail because I'm only in one of the photos. Alex, my oldest, is in 2 of the photos. And then there was a giant spoon with a cherry on it that was dipping into a little pond. And I thought that needed to stand on its own. That particular sculpture definitely needed its own photo. I really enjoyed incorporating the 2 of us, though, in the photos so that you could kind of get a scale for how big the things we were looking at actually were. Particularly this large blue rooster on the bottom, which was massive. The little red kind of dot that is standing in front of the rooster is my son, who is almost 6 foot tall. So that gives you any idea of how huge that sculpture was. It was massive. And so we just had a great time. And it was just sort of, bopping around Minnesota, having a little bit of fun, just trying to figure out if this was where he wanted to go. And I think it is. He's really excited to go to college next year. I am proud of him for being excited. But I can't say that I'm not entirely worried, that he's going to have some difficulties, because that's life. That's life. We all have difficulties when we go away to school or leave home for the first time. And I just worry because I'm mom. But this lovely layout ends up being a lesson in structure. And I think that this works out really well. It's a nice linear layout, and that is the way that I like to scrap. I like to have my little boundaries and borders and have nice linear lines to work with as a base, and then I will go to a more whimsical style and add in the soft rounded things like the hearts and like the banners and the things that just have a bit more of a whimsical feel to them. Word phrases, all of those things really help to soften a heavily linear layout. With this one definitely is a very linear layout. Now I'm just very simply tucking things. I've got a label that I cut in half and tucked behind 2 of the photos in opposing sides of the layout so that they balance out. Kept my embellishing in the center pretty simple with just my chipboard title and journaling spot, and then 3 little hearts to fill in that gap in between. And so that's really all I'm doing, is just fixing up the spots where I think it needs a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and then move on to another area. So anywhere that your eye is kind of landing and you're like, that needs something. That needs something. go ahead and start playing in that area. If that's where your mind has landed, that's a good place to start. Because quite often you can get the background put together and think, now what? Where do I put the embellishment clusters? All of that. Wherever your eye is just kind of drifting towards, wherever it's drawn to, that's where you should pay attention. Maybe that spot needs an embellishment cluster. And go ahead and try it out. Audition some things in that place and see if it works for you. See if you like the way that it looks. If you don't, move on to a different area. So now I'm finishing this off with some more word phrases because I do like a wordy layout. As I have said before, I am a wordy girl. I do enjoy the words. And I do tend to use a lot of words on my layouts. So this is pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and do some controlled splatter with Nuvo and then with the ink sprays, and that's it. This one's done. I had so much fun with this layout once I figured out where it was going to go. It's a little bit different from my normal style, but it is kind of a return to an older style that I used to do. And that was kind of fun too, to just sort of revisit that style. Now be sure to check out the Cocoa Vanilla blog at cocoavanilla.com.au for more photos. And until next time, bye y'all.